And we are live. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to today's live stream. Glad you guys are here as always. As you guys know, my name is Gershom Fulcott. We are VB Technologies that does Bitcoin mining that we all love. Mr. Wong, happy Friday
Hey,
to you,
hey,
sir.
happy Friday. Happy Friday.
Yeah. What's going on? How was your week, Mr. Wong? I know you had a fabulous week, right?
How do you know that?
Because all your weeks are fabulous.
Well, it doesn't hurt when the Bitcoin price trying to sustain at or above the $11,000 range. So
Yeah.
that is fantastic.
Absolutely. I think that's a good sign. We like we talked about Monday, we had that really nasty spike down, when we cracked 12,000. But no worries, we kind of expected that to a certain extent. And, like I talk about, I glad that we established ourselves above 11,000. And so now we can actually eye 14,000 in a realistic manner and feel like, hey, we can crack 14,000. And once we crack 14,000, and I expect a pullback, like I said before. But once we crack 14,000 and establish ourselves above 14,000, then 20,000, here we come, buddy. So yeah, everything has been good. Hey, what's going on with you, James, out here in California? The
Um,
lovely,
you,
beautiful California.
not too much. I don't think people are wearing masks that as much. It's kind of the same old. It seems like people are kind of over it with everything going on. So we'll see what happens, man. It's hard to get a reading with everything going on. I don't really know where we all stand with regard to the pandemic, but I'm just kind of hanging in there.
Yeah. I think the unfortunate thing, for me personally, I think the unfortunate thing with the coronavirus and the pandemic is that it has become politicized. And so you don't know what's truth and what's not truth. And you don't know what's misinformation, what's not misinformation, right? And it's really unfortunate because and like I said this before, we're not seeing any true leadership coming out of Washington. And so now the entire country is confused. We don't know who's telling the truth. We don't know what the numbers are realistically, right? So the best thing we can do is just to be safe than sorry. And so yes, hey, wear the mask. Some see it as a deep state symbol, and I get all that because I'm in the conspiracy camp most of the time. So I understand that point of view. At the same time, I know people who have been affected by this disease. I mean, not disease, but this virus. So I cannot walk around as if it doesn't exist. And also know that when it comes to politics, any information that can be weaponized to benefit one party or the other party or one group against the other group, that's going to happen. But I figure, hey, just play it safe and see how things play out. How do you see it, Mr. Wong?
Hey, you're right. In our country, unfortunately, it has become a more of a political or situation. But if we look at outside the U.S., if we look at places like that has done really really well in containing the virus and keeping its citizens safe, and you look at examples like Taiwan and Vietnam, they have done a phenomenal job, right? And part of it is because they or the leadership over there are able to send out a unified message. Unified messages such as wearing a mask, keeping a social distancing, right? Uh, those are real science. There's real science behind it, and that would keep people or from getting infected. So we ought to listen to and look at some of these countries, what they have done, and their result speaks for itself, right? So and that's what we are to kind of pay more attention to.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree. I think, Mr. Wong, you and I were talking about this a few days ago, and this is just my personal opinion. This is what I think. I think that by nature, our culture, the American culture, is kind of rebellious, and it's not a bad thing. I think it's kind of a good thing because it helps to keep the powers that be in check, right? But I think as a culture, we're kind of rebellious, and so situations like this, it could play against us, right? Because we're not just going to take everything that's said and just go with it. We question everything, we push back on everything. We read deep into everything. They call it go down the rabbit hole and everything. It's just part of our culture. It's just who we are. And so, when you have a culture like this where we just don't take things, we're not very obedient. And I think other countries, they're more obedient. They will follow their leaders, and they maybe even have better leaders, which kind of comes into play. If they trust their leaders are more stand-up people. They have integrity. They're honorable people. Then yes, their nation will follow their lead and do as they say. But right now our leaders out of Washington is so fragmented, and everything is so politicized. So, and then you couple that with our rebellious nature, you're going to have situations like this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Go ahead, Mr. Wong.
I said it's just unfortunate. That we let our politics take over our common sense. So I hope we start seeing some changes on there. So that's what really is going to help in keeping the numbers in control. So
yeah. Well, all we can do right now, Mr. Wong, is do what we can do, right?
Yep.
Yeah. All right. So moving right along, our main guy, we have actually the video today is another interview by Anthony Pompliano, but he was actually on a podcast the other day, and the podcast is called What Bitcoin Did. And during the interview, he made the case that, and actually he revised his prediction for the price of Bitcoin in the medium term, like say by the end of next year, going into 2022, because for a very long time he was saying that he could see Bitcoin at 100,000, but now he said, hey, after revisiting the data and looking at everything that's going on, Bitcoin could easily crack 400,000. And we talked about this before. A lot of these numbers, they seem so outlandish, and they may even seem a bit unrealistic, but that's because those who may be new to the space may not understand how Bitcoin operate, right? Like I said, in 2017, I saw Bitcoin went from 600 to 20,000. So, he's saying that Bitcoin could easily crack 400,000. I want to share with you some of the things that he was talking about in that particular podcast, which I put in the article. And he said, look, if you were to debate with people in terms of what the gold market's market cap is, because a lot of times people are looking at Bitcoin, what Bitcoin is, and they're looking at gold. And we're going to talk about gold actually in the next topic coming up. But when you look at Bitcoin, you look at gold, and you look at the market cap of gold, which is around $8 trillion. That's debatable. Some people say it's around 7 trillion, between 7 and 8 trillion, somewhere around there, right? But if you look at the market cap of gold, right, over $8 trillion, and he would have said that puts Bitcoin, depending on how many are lost or stolen, right? When you factor in, if you get the market cap of gold start to flow into Bitcoin, and when you look at the number of Bitcoin that's out there and the number of Bitcoin that's coming online every day, because remember with the halving where the distribution got cut in half, now it's only 900 Bitcoin coming online every day as opposed to 1,800 about 6 months ago, right? Right before the halving, not 6 months, I think before the halving. So when you look at the amount of Bitcoin coming online, and when you factor in the limited supply of 21 million, and then when you factor in the amount of Bitcoin that has been lost, and if some of that market cap in gold start to flow into Bitcoin, then it is not unrealistic to see Bitcoin at 400,000 in a year, 2 years or so. And that's conservative because Raoul Paul is thinking that, he's looking at the same factors, the market cap of gold that will eventually start bleeding off into Bitcoin, the amount of Bitcoin that has been lost, and the limited supply. We factor all those things and look at it from a realistic standpoint. You can see Bitcoin at $1 million. Now, that's Raoul Paul's prediction. But Pomp is saying, okay, maybe not 1 million, but at the very least 400,000. So can you imagine from where we are right now, let's say a year and a half from now, even 2 years from now, with Bitcoin at $400,000 per Bitcoin? How would your life be changed, right? Mr. Wong, what would you do with yourself if Bitcoin was at 400,000 per Bitcoin?
I would, immediately start looking for a beachfront property for myself, either in Florida or California. So I'll see you down. I'll see you there.
You would join James on his beachfront property in California?
Maybe not at that caliber, but maybe behind James. but then I'll build a deck so that I can still see the beach.
Not in James caliber, huh? But listen, I know we're making light of it, but we got to take this thing serious, right? There's so many people right now, and that's going to be devastated by what's going on. And that's part of the topic that they're discussing in the video coming up. I don't think enough people are taking what's taking place right now serious enough.
Mm-hmm.
And, and I've said it before, not just from the coronavirus standpoint, right? The Federal Reserve is on pace, in terms of the government, the overall structure between the Fed, the Treasury Department, all of them, right, together, because they're all working together. They're on pace to printing 7 trillion, maybe up to $10 trillion in the space of less than a year. So I think we've become so immune to these numbers, trillion, billions, we don't even understand what that means anymore. But when you step back, when you back up off and look at the big long view and realize what's taking place right now, when this all comes home to roost, a lot of people is going to lose everything they have. Everything they have, right? Mm-hmm. And so when we talk about this all the time, it's like, I honestly feel like based on what we're doing and the services that we provide and the product that we have and the company that we have formed, right, together, it's almost a duty for us to bring this information to the masses. Because I'm telling you, there are people that that you've brought Bitcoin to their attention and they look at you sideways as if you're crazy. They're going to lose everything that they have, right? And so we have to take this serious. What's going on with the feds? Can you imagine in the past, 3 to 4 months, they've printed over $3 trillion and they're thinking about bringing online another trillion, right? And they're fighting over that right now. They cannot come to an agreement, right? The entire political landscape is in disarray. They're talking about we may not even have an election coming November. That's how bad things are, right? So we really have to take a step back and realize where we are right now in history. And if people are not taking it serious enough to hedge themselves from what's taking place in this fiat currency system, they're going to be in for a rude awakening. And so $400,000 Bitcoin, yeah, I could see that. I could see $1 million Bitcoin in a few years. Does it seem unrealistic? Not to me, it doesn't, because I've been around long enough to see what Bitcoin has done, and I've read the history and to see all the performance of Bitcoin. So if you want to preserve your wealth, and if you want to save yourself and your family and your children and grandchildren, you better start figuring out how to get involved with what we're doing and start to get yourself out of this crumbling system that is crumbling right before your eyes.
You know, Gershom, this there are many experts that are predicting that in order for us to just come out of this pandemic, we're looking at $8 to $10 trillion in bailout,
That's insane.
and this is, and yeah, I mean, and we have said that many times in on our show that we almost dropped to the floor in 2008 when we heard about less than $700 billion in bailout money. This is compared to this is just that was a drop in the bucket. You know. Now, don't forget, this is just enough to kind of get us, the American economy out of the pandemic. There are a lot of systemic issues that we have not yet, been able to deal with.
Your audio, Mr. Wong.
And he was interviewing Chamar, and they were talking about, you know, just building out these pension systems down the line is going to be massive. They're looking at 50 to 60 trillion. Can you imagine that? Right?
You have to laugh to keep from crying.
And they made a very a good example, out of New York City transit system, right? Revenue is down because less people are out working and taking transportations. I have a massive shortfall of their pension. And in that show, that podcast, they didn't give the amount out, but how many transit authorities do we have in this country, right? And how many city or different city pensions that we have in this country, and when it comes time to have to build these, different pension systems out, what is that going to cost? They came up with a rough estimate of anywhere between 50 to 60 trillion dollars. Think about that. What is that going to do to the U.S. fiat? And how is that going to affect the Bitcoin price? And we already see, and Tony actually put it in a very simple term. We have been seeing these institutional buyers that are coming in, and they're mostly buying it, OTC, right, over the counter, off of the exchanges, which makes sense because when you try to pump in or try to buy $1 million, 2 million, 10 million, tens of millions, hundreds of $1 millions worth of Bitcoin, you are going to push the price up, and as a buyer, it's not going to be good for you, right? So they employ brokers, institutional brokers, to go out to source out these Bitcoins, right? And without hitting the exchanges, so therefore they're not pushing the price up, and they're holding on to these Bitcoins. And like you said earlier, there are only 900 being mined every day, right? There are only 900. Where just a couple months ago, it was producing about 1,800 every day. So, simply speaking, the demand is getting higher, according to these experts, but the amount of supply is fixed, right? So simple supply and demand. So the price has to go up. We're just waiting for these, big Cadillacs, which I think, as we print out more and more fiat, it's going to help, substantiate or make the business case for Bitcoins even stronger.
Yeah. So I want to touch on one thing you brought up, is the pension system. So you're right. You're so right. There's so many pension systems right now that's in trouble. CalPERS out in California, they're in trouble. The pension system out in Chicago, Illinois, they're in trouble. The pension system here in Philadelphia is in trouble. Jersey, they're in trouble. And you can go from state to state and city to city, and they're all in trouble.
Yep.
So the average pension system before the 2008 crisis, in order for them to have a decent rate of return and to be able to sustain paying out from the pension to the retirees, they needed around 8% return annually. And when we had the 2008 crisis and they cut the interest rate to almost zero, then those pension systems were not getting the rate of return that they needed. And I'm not sure how many people know this, but there are letters going out, especially in Jersey and other places, where they were informing the retirees that they were going to start cutting their pension, what they were getting, in like half, because they were not getting the rate of return. Because the pension, when a pension invests, they have to invest in safe assets, in bonds, muni bonds, stuff like that, right? They cannot afford to go out and invest in exotic assets. So when the Fed cut the rates down to almost zero, the pension funds were suffocating. And so now to the point where they're underwater and they need to be bailed out, right? You saying something, Mr. Wong? Mr. Wong, you there? Anyway, so and actually,
yeah, I'm sorry, I got disconnected.
That's okay. But actually, part of the issue with this next stimulus bill that they're trying to pass is that they are trying to also put in there, right, some money to start to bail out some of these local municipalities' pension system. And the GOPs are saying, no, we can't do that. And the Democrats are saying, yes, we need to do that. So you're right, Mr. Wong, the pension system is in trouble. And that's another thing why I love Bitcoin so much, because I hate to even say this, but a lot of people right now who are retired and relying on their pension to pay their bills and to eat, they're going to be in for a rude awakening. As much as that breaks my heart to even think about it, but it's going to happen because the pension system is upside down. And if the government doesn't bail them out, they will go bust. And so they have to bail them out. But how? How much can they actually print? Can they really print $50 trillion to bail out all this pension system? Really? And if they do print $50 trillion, what is that going to do to our currency? So we got serious problems coming down the road. And I know I've been called conspiracy theories, but I just find it very, very suspicious that right when we start to go into a financial crisis, we got hit with a pandemic. Because this crisis started back in September of last year. And I've mentioned that before, when the repo market blew up. So I'm very suspicious. I'm not saying that there isn't a pandemic. I'm just saying I'm suspicious. I'm allowed to be suspicious. Doesn't mean I'm right, but I can have my suspicions. So I'm very suspicious. And how long can they keep this up? I don't know, but we'll see. But yeah, we have some problems coming down the pike. So moving on to the next topic, right? I don't want to be all doom and gloom, but I really want us to take what's taking place very, very serious. And this year, we haven't seen anything yet. I think as we get closer to the election, I think we're going to start seeing more civil unrest. We're going to see more demonstration, and we want to see all of it, because this is not a political show, but this election is for all the marbles. It's for all the marbles, and they're going to go all out. So we'll see what happens. Next topic, Mr. Wong, gold or Bitcoin? I know which side you're on, But the debate, listen, the debate is heating up. There's so many conversations going on right now as to what's better for your long-term store of value. Is it gold or is it Bitcoin?
Well,
Right?
based on my age, I'm opting for Bitcoins. I am in that, younger generation. So,
You in that millennium. You
well, I'm younger than a millennial. So,
sure you are. But
yeah.
so JP Morgan, our friend JP Morgan, they did a survey and trying to break down, this argument in terms of gold versus Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm in the camp that we need both. I don't see any reason why it needs to be one or the other, right? We always talk about you have to diversify your portfolio, right? And you don't want to put all your eggs into one basket. So I don't see why we can't have both gold and Bitcoin in our portfolio.
Well,
And I think
I think you should have, both. I mean, you should never put all your eggs in one basket. I mean, that's what we always, try to tell people, right? I mean, we're not here giving any investment advice or anything like that, but it just makes common sense, right? So
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And but the conversations are being had, and it's kind of like it's becoming to a certain extent combative. You have those in the gold camp, and then you have those in the Bitcoin camp, and they're going at each other. I'm like, I don't get it. I see the argument on both sides, and I agree with both of them. They're both good, right? They're both valuable, and they both have their own unique cases. So it doesn't need to be one over the other, right? You need to have some gold in your portfolio, and you need to have some Bitcoin. Now, me personally, I'm more heavy with Bitcoin, right? But you got to have both. So, but the one thing that they realize is, and we talked about this before, the younger people, they definitely are more inclined to Bitcoin, but they grew up in
which is me.
right? I mean, that's all they know, right? But yeah, I don't see any reason why there needs to be this argument about gold over Bitcoin. But I will say this, though. I will say this, and I've said this before. I think based on what's going on right now with the economy and the money printing and all of that, right? I do believe that we will see gold and Bitcoin separate themselves from the traditional equity market. And so I think they're going to separate themselves together and they're going to run together. But I do believe in the end, we will see Bitcoin start to separate from gold. Gold will still be valuable. It's going to still bring value to the table. But I think in terms of value, in terms of increase in value, I do believe that we'll see Bitcoin increase more in value over gold. But I still believe that everyone should have both in their portfolio.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I mean, you should have both. I mean, it just make common sense. I wouldn't. I couldn't understand. I wouldn't. Think that it makes sense to me to just have one and not the other. So it just makes common sense to me that you should diversify. So precious metal is one of the great and long employed strategy for these money managers. So
yes. Yeah, you just cannot turn your back on gold. I think it would be a mistake to do that. As much as I love Bitcoin and I'm all about Bitcoin, but you still cannot just turn your back on gold. It's been around for too long. It has proven itself for way too long, hundreds, thousands of years, if not, right? And so there doesn't need to be an argument in terms of combativeness. You can certainly discuss their qualities and in terms of their use case and what's better for this and what's better for that, right? Like gold is better for certain things, and Bitcoin's better for certain things, right? And that's why it's good for you to have both, because they both bring different things to the table, right? So the argument in terms of one over the other doesn't need to be combative. It just need to be where I think they both complement each other. And so I think everyone should have both in their portfolio.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, she was stunned there. All right, so it's time for a video. And this video is on the Pompliano podcast, and is interviewing a gentleman who is an investor, and he actually is one of the early investors in Tesla. This gentleman invested in Tesla when it was $30 per share. Can you imagine that? Right? And now Tesla is what, 1,200? I'm not even sure. But so he's a big time early investor, really understand investment and the space and what's going on with the economy. And he's having a conversation with Pompliano, and they're talking about money. And Pomp asked him, hey, you know, give us your thoughts on Bitcoin. Now, he said something about Bitcoin which you may not agree with, right? But here we are all about full disclosure. We're not trying to just it's all puppies and ice cream and butterflies, right? We have to look at things for what they are. So he does see some flaw, not in Bitcoin itself, but in how some of the exchanges deal with Bitcoin and some of the securities around Bitcoin. So let's listen to what he's saying and see if it makes sense to you. Yes, he loves Bitcoin. He sees all the value in Bitcoin, but he's also talking about some of the things that he thinks needs to be improved when it comes to Bitcoin, particularly when it comes to storing your Bitcoin in a safe way. So when you get ready, James, please play the video, sir.
Kicking the soccer ball. But it's super fun and everybody gets into it and our production just goes through the roof. Like, if I just said, I'm going to give $1,000 to the guy who's the best, you know, they just, they don't care. They don't care about money.
Speaking of money, Bitcoin, you were converted a while ago by Brock Pierce.
And Roger Ver.
Kind of what your, what has your journey been with Bitcoin? Kind of what are your thoughts now?
I love Bitcoin, you know. So Bitcoin's really disappointing to me right now because I feel like the developers who are very, very smart, who promised a lot of things to people, have not done their jobs. I think they made too much money and they just were like, it's easier just to print the money and make the money than to actually make it useful like they promised. And that's my gripe right now. So there's two gripes I have with Bitcoin because I've been hacked and attacked for my Bitcoin before, and it's a nightmare. I had a 2FA attack, by the way. Lock your SIM card, everybody. Boy, nightmare if they get your phone, and they can get your phone easily. So lock your SIM card. But like, first of all, exchanges offer no protection. So Coinbase, major firm, how am I going to put $1 million in Bitcoin when it can just disappear and I have no protection? The exchanges certainly don't help you. You can't recover anything. There's no SIPC. So I've been arguing for a long time, Bitcoin needs an SIPC. It just needs an insurance. Like, I would pay in a certain amount per transaction to just know my money at Coinbase and Binance and Bittrex and all these places is safe. But it's like somebody can just hack in and take your money and there's literally nothing you can do. How is Bitcoin going to grow into this enormous thing with institutions investing if you have no security? So like, if you read, there's this great book about the Winklevoss twins, Ben Mizrach, who I love, wrote this book, Bitcoin Billionaires. Highly recommend it. And they go through this part about how they secured all their Bitcoin and the process they had to go through to make it secure. And it's absurd. It's absurd. So if you're going to have $1 million in Bitcoin, I can't even tell you how much effort it is just to keep that safe. Where you can just give me $1 million and nothing can happen to it. So I think the exchanges have to solve that problem. Insurance, protection. Secondly, use. I can't believe if I want to buy something, I can Apple Pay with 2 clicks. Why can't I just pay with Bitcoin? I still can't do it. I can't do it through PayPal. I can't do it through anybody. I can't do it through Coinbase. I can't do it through Square Cash. Like, why can't Square Cash? Can't I just use Bitcoin to pay for things? I want to use my Bitcoin to pay for things, and I still can't. I still can't. So I think this needs to be solved. If these two things are solved, Bitcoin goes up forever.
What is your thought process in terms of maybe not price prediction, but in terms of is Bitcoin eventually the next global reserve currency? Is it?
It already is.
Explain.
Well, like, so the genius of Bitcoin, right? So the genius of Bitcoin was, like gold, it has a finite amount of Bitcoin. And so the longer you mine the coins, we just had a halving, you know, the harder it is to get more coins. So now there's half as many coins printed per day than there was a year ago. This process is very much like gold. So what makes gold valuable is less per se the gold, it's more per se the fact it's so hard to get new gold, and the amount of gold actually stays the same. So it works real well if we all collect the same rock and we just don't find new rocks. But if you actually study the history of silver, the reason why silver isn't a reserve currency is because they found a lot of it. And they were like, this isn't that hard, you know, not worth that much then. So Bitcoin has the ability to, just like gold, to go up forever. Because, so my whole theory about money, actually I was going to write about this because now the government's printing money so fast that I don't even believe in the dollar anymore. Like, I just don't even believe in cash anymore. Like, so there's no value to holding cash because it's being printed so fast that between inflation and the cost of living and everything going up because of this, that holding dollars is the easiest way to lose all your money. So over 100 years, if you had $100, you will end up with $1 of equivalent value. But if I take that $100 and convert it to Bitcoin or gold, in 100 years, it will go up with inflation. So I don't see why Bitcoin acts any differently than gold. And in fact, if Bitcoin was able to deal with larger institutional investors, it would be worth $50,000. But until I can, like, I have clients who want to buy Bitcoin and I say, I can't do it for you. A, I can't. B, like, you want to buy 50,000 worth, you know, I do trades at like 50,000, 100,000. I can't do that with Bitcoin. It's just too hard. Just trying to buy 100,000 in Bitcoin, you know, it's like a penny stock.
Well, and I think probably the biggest obstacle for you is just the fiduciary duty of buying Bitcoin and kind of regulations and things like that.
That's a whole nother issue, but yeah.
Yeah. But the institutional stuff now, I think, is getting a little bit better, right? You see people like Fidelity and others coming in. And, it's
and the Winklevosses.
Yep. Yeah. Look, Cameron and Tyler have done a great job with Gemini.
Yeah.
I think that the Coinbases, they just bought Tagomi, which is a basically a prime brokerage type business. And
right.
I think a lot of this is kind of coming together. But to your point, until it is as dead simple as what somebody's used to doing in the legacy world, like, there will be obstacles. And maybe it doesn't.
Yeah, like, I'm not selling my Bitcoin. You know, I mean, I haven't been a buyer in a while because after the hack, I was really turned off. You know, it sucks. It's still, I'm still trying to get control of some of my accounts. It's like, just security is a nightmare. But like, right. So I just don't feel comfortable having that much money in Bitcoin because it's like so hard to deal with it.
How do you think about it in your portfolio? Is it something that you're like, look, it's like a 1% to 2% type allocation,
yeah,
and more of like, you know, an inflation hedge, or is it something bigger? Like how do you just put it together?
Exactly that. It's maybe a 1% to 2% of your portfolio. It's an inflation hedge. It works the same as gold. It's digital gold. In my mind, you know, so I'm not a big believer in governments. So I have some pretty radical beliefs that I don't talk about much because people.
Well, let's talk about them right now. Great.
Yeah, I am. So one of them is, I think that most governments of the world are the most corrupt mess of disgraceful attempts at governing that I've ever seen. I don't think there's ever been a time in history, except maybe in the 30s when we had Hitler, Stalin, and, you know, the whole thing in Japan, you know, imperialism or whatever you want to call it. It's really disgraceful how governments haven't served not only the people, but from rich to poor, and the theft. I mean, just in LA, every day you read an article about politicians who've stolen from developers and from people, and the corruption probes up and down to the president of the United States. So I think that governments in general have lost its utility in a lot of ways. And And so things like Bitcoin make a lot of sense to me, because why do I have to live in a world where the US I have to use their money when their money is worthless and they just print it like crazy and give it to people, you know? But I could own this Bitcoin and go anywhere in the world and use it. Okay. So to me, Bitcoin makes so much sense in this world. It could be hugely successful if they do this right. But I still think all the major players that should be doing it got too rich and they're just not trying that hard anymore. And I think they need to try harder, and I think it'll work. And I think there's never been a time between the euro, in the EU, they're going to issue $1 trillion of debt backed by the EU for the first time, not backed by a country, not backed by any individual, not backed by anything, just the EU. Now, we all know that the EU is a farcical thing that everybody wants to leave, right? It's a failed experiment, basically, that they're still trying to keep going. So what rate are they offering on that $1 trillion? It's minus 0.1. Now, I went around all day saying I will borrow indefinite amount of money at minus 0.1. Just give me all the money in the world at minus 0.1. Who's going to give money at minus 0.1? Obviously, somebody does. So this is proof that the entire system has failed. It's failed. Like, we're failed. I go on to buy bonds right now. I'll leave this podcast. I go on. I say, I want a 1-year bond from Apple. It's a negative yield. Nobody's reporting this. This is not on the news. Oh, every bond that's a year or less that's not going to default has a negative yield. Like, I have to run like a really long screen to get a bond with a yield. That's a failure of an entire system. Our entire system has failed. So the entire financial system is backwards now.
So what happens? Like,
I don't know. It doesn't work. So in my mind, none of this works. So how do we get out of it? I don't know. Once you have negative yields, I went to school. You went to school. You're a really smart guy. Like, you know what's going to happen? Like, if you print $1 trillion every 2 months and you only have to pay 0.5 on it. See, I think it works as long as the idiots give you the money. Okay. So somebody's giving them the money at negative yields. It's not me. My computer won't even let me buy it. It's like reject, negative yield. I was like, boy, at least my computers won't let me do stupid shit. But somebody's computer is letting them do this. So explain to me what's going to happen to all these short-term bond funds and money market funds with negative yields, and they're still paying 0.1. I think Marcus is paying 1%. I think Betterment or Wealthfront's paying 1%. So how are they paying 1%, but they're buying bonds that yield negative? How long does that work? So how do banks work with negative yields? So all of a sudden you start to realize that we've created a nightmare, a financial nightmare box that I can't figure out our way out of. Now we have 20% of America unemployed. I drive down the streets to empty buildings. So next door is Activision, empty. Snapchat, empty. My building, empty, except for us. We're like, why aren't people working in their offices? What's wrong? It's like you wear a mask and you go to work. It's like we have people farther apart. We have a big office, fortunately, and not everybody comes in all the time, but nobody coming in. So what happens to real estate? What's going to happen to all this debt? Who's paying? I wouldn't be paying my rent for an office building I'm not using. Who owns that Activision building? As an Activision shareholder, I'm not stoked that they're paying rent on a building they're not using. Paying my rent for an office building.
All right, guys, I know a lot was said right there. And like I said in the beginning, it's not all puppies and ice cream. He realized that in terms of, especially around security, we do have some issues, with Bitcoin. And he actually, one of our members, I'm not going to call his name right now, but he actually experienced the same thing that this guy experienced, just on a smaller scale. But he got SIM card hacked. They hacked the SIM card and switched his SIM card on him and actually had access to his Bitcoin, right? So he's talking about how the fact that going through that and how that can be devastating. So imagine if you have, a lot of your wealth in Bitcoin and you get hacked, right? And talking about that, that's one of the reasons why we talk about Sean, our new CTO that came on board with us, and his big thing is all about securities, because we know there are hackers out there. They're always trying to get into your Bitcoin some kind of way. So that's why we've built so much security around Kabul. And I know sometimes you guys try to withdraw money, Bitcoin from Kabul, and it takes a long time and all of that. But the reason for that is we have so many securities features built into Kabul because we know how important that is. So, he does have some issues with security. Now, it's getting better. A lot of things that he's talking about is getting better. PayPal just announced that they will going to start allowing you to buy Bitcoin through PayPal. Square already allow you to buy Bitcoin and PayPal. But another thing he's saying is that these entities, they may allow you to buy Bitcoin and PayPal, but it's difficult to use Bitcoin to buy things through them, right? So you can use their platform to buy Bitcoin, but if you're trying to use Bitcoin to buy items, it's not as easy. So there are some things that have to be worked out, and that's why I see Bitcoin more of a store of value, more than using it to buy a pack of gum and whatnot. It's more to hold on to keep your wealth intact over the long term. But he does realize that the system is completely falling apart. And this is not just me saying it. I've been saying it for a while, and I sound like I'm a conspiracy theorist, but it's just because I've been watching this for so many years. I've been studying this whole thing for a long time, and I realized that the system is falling apart. And that's why when this coronavirus thing came on board and they talk about printing all this money, I'm like, wait a second. So is this what they're going to do? Because I knew the system blew up in September when the repo market blew up. So yes, those of us who pay attention to this space, we all know that this is not working. And yes, they're going to try to print all this money and paper it over. They, just like Jason said earlier, they didn't fix anything in 2008, 2009. They didn't fix anything. And so that system, what they did was just print a bunch of money again, paper it over, bail out the big banks, bail out Wall Street, but they didn't fix the underlying problem with the system. And here we are again trying to do the same thing. At some point, printing all the money is not going to fix the problem. We have some systemic changes that needs to be made, and no one wants to do it because the pain is too severe to fix all these things. And he's talking about negative yield in the bond market. That directly affects the pension fund, right? And so the pension fund are in trouble, like we talk about. There's so many issues going on, guys. I mean, some people just have idea what's going on. So yes, you have to make sure that you are edging yourself from this failing system into something that you can preserve your wealth for yourself and for your future, like Bitcoin. What's your take, Mr. Wong?
Then he goes through a lot of different components of Bitcoins. Yeah, I agree with him. Even today, you're trying to buy Bitcoin is a pain in the rear end, right? There's no easy way of just to go out and buy some Bitcoins and you want to hold on to it. Secondly, security is a big concern. Now, not necessarily, security within the Bitcoin network, but securities in terms of storing your Bitcoins. It's a nightmare. My goodness, our members, went through that, SIM swap. And that is not the fault of our member, but it's really, it's the fault of the telecom company. It made it so easy for them, for someone to go in and just, basically swap out the SIM. And I'm glad that you mentioned that, Gershom, that Kabul actually is, have these securities in mind when we design our proprietary wallet. So it's very different when it comes to other wallets that are available out there. But I do agree with him, that it does, keeps you awake if you have like millions of hundreds of thousands of dollars holdings in Bitcoins, right? I mean, you constantly worry about people might try to steal it from you, because
Yeah,
once it is transferred out, it is gone.
that's it.
You
That's
can't
it.
get
It's
it back.
gone.
Can't recall. So, but I do like the fact that he believes in the fundamentals of what Bitcoin is designed or created to do, right? So, which to me, it's a long-term hedge and long-term game for me that I see every day that our government or our central bank and the central banks around the world are just printing out money left and right with no regard or no sign of stopping anytime soon. If we do go ahead and start bailing out these pension funds, the magnitude would be like we have never seen anything before. 50 to 60 trillion dollars. Okay, so what is that going to make the values of Bitcoins, right, in a couple of years? And I think we've been kicking down this can down the road for the longest time. Eventually, we will not be able to fix this problem with just a band-aid fix. It's going to have to be a systemic correction.
Absolutely. Mr. Wong, you said something, and I don't think they can stop. They can. They have to print all this money. They can't stop.
Right.
Because the minute they stop, the system blows up. So they can't stop.
Right.
So they're going to print until they hyperinflate the currency.
Mm-hmm.
And what's happening is they have painted themselves into a corner.
Mm-hmm.
And when they drop the rates to zero, and I've been saying this, Mr. Wong, I know you don't agree with this, but I'm telling you, negative interest rate is coming. They will implement negative interest rate. I'm telling you, it's going to happen. But the point is this: they have painted themselves into a corner. So right now, they cannot stop printing all this money to bail out the banks, to bail out the big corporation. They can't stop.
Mm-hmm.
So they're going to keep doing it until they hyperinflate the currency, because they don't have a choice. Imagine, like you said earlier, in 2008, Hank Paulson went to Congress and asked for $900 billion. First it was 700, and they laughed at him like, "Get out of here," right? And he went back and said, "Hey, if you guys don't give us this money, the economic system is going to fall apart. We're going to have an economic collapse."
Mm-hmm.
So he scared them into giving them the money, right? Partially. That was only 900 billion. Now we're printing $1 trillion like it's nothing. Why? They can't stop. So they will continue to do this until they hyperinflate the currency, because if they stop this quantitative easing, once they started, they knew they wouldn't be able to stop. It's like a Ponzi scheme. You cannot taper a Ponzi scheme. And this entire system is running like a Ponzi scheme. So they can't stop.
It's the largest Ponzi scheme.
It's a gigantic Ponzi scheme. They cannot stop. If they stop, if right now the Fed say, "Look, we're not going to implement no more stimulus, no more bailout," you see how fast all these corporations start going to bankruptcy. Banks start falling apart. They can't stop printing all this money. So they're going to print until they hyperinflate. So the thing is this. Here's a question. What are you going to do about it? That is the question. Are you going to sit back and just let this thing happen to you? Or are you going to find a way to hedge yourself from this crumbling system? Right?
Well, of course. We should, find a way to hatch ourselves. So, and it just makes sense. It
absolutely does make sense. Yeah. All right, Mr. Wong, we're running out of time, so we're getting towards the end. Just one more topic I want to talk about. Someone, I think it was yesterday or day before yesterday, moved $1 billion in Bitcoin. $1 billion. Do you know how much they paid to move that, Mr. Wong?
How much?
$4.
Cheapskate.
Listen,
Oh,
that
listen,
is
we are Bitcoin miner. We collect mining fees, okay?
but listen, that's part of the attractiveness in Bitcoin that you could. Okay, now stop and think about it. The person that moved that $1 billion, that paid $4.
Yeah.
Imagine if they were to pay in the traditional system, if they were to pay the traditional transfer fee like 3%, and that's on the low end, right? Sometimes you pay 5%. But if they had paid 3%, you know how much that would be?
It would be a lot of money.
$30 million.
But Gershom, I believe he paid a lot more than, $5 or $4. Now
You
on
think?
the network fees, yes, is what he pay because it's public ledger. There's no there's no way of hiding it, right? But
Yeah.
I bet you he pay a lot more to the broker who put the deal together for him.
Oh well, yeah, in that, yeah, on the back, okay, yeah, absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely. Yeah,
So
yeah.
the reason why he did that is what we mentioned earlier. You're doing this to avoid these price swings, right? When you try to buy $1 billion worth of Bitcoins, I think how many Bitcoins did it work out to be? It's got to be like 100 some thousand.
It's like
100,000 and plus, right?
97. I think it was like 97,000. Yeah, it was
97,000.
Yeah.
Okay, so depending on the price, right? So, so think about this. I mean, a broker is not going to, do this for free. I mean, he has to go out there procure 90 plus thousand number of Bitcoin. So he can't just go to a single source. He's most likely have to go to multiple sources to kind of put this thing together for this particular
very good point.
Big investors. So that particular investors obviously sees some value in Bitcoin as a hedge, right, against his current portfolio, or otherwise, who would put $1 billion into something that they don't believe in? It's just crazy. So
yeah,
he obviously see values in there, and that's the point that we're trying to convey across to all of you listeners out there. We see that, and there are a lot of institutional investors, big investors are start to see that, and they're coming into the space. It's just a matter of time because there's only 900 Bitcoins that are being mined a day. So once they as in those big institutional investors, cannot source them privately anymore, right? They're going to have to come to the public exchange and buy it from us, and then that's going to help dramatically push the Bitcoin prices price up, in my personal opinion. So it's just a matter of time, because once they run out of these supplies, then supply and demand, it's just basic economics. Once they run out, they're going to have to come to the public exchange and buy some.
Yeah, absolutely. But you made a good point, though. A deal that big is procured by brokers to actually go out there and secure that many Bitcoin. You're not going to go on Coinbase and purchase 90,000 Bitcoin, right? It's just not going to happen. But yeah, but nonetheless, that's part of the attractiveness with something like Bitcoin. Even though, yes, they probably pay a nice broker fee to a broker to put the deal together, but on the network itself, only cost them $4. If they were trying to wire that in a traditional system, it would be a lot more zeros behind the $4.
Yeah.
So,
oh yeah,
yeah, right.
By the way, so the entire 24-hour volume on Coinbase Pro was only 24,000 and change Bitcoins.
Wow. So yeah.
So one exchange wouldn't satisfy his order.
That kind of, yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
And let alone there are other buyers out there too. So that's the reason why they choose to do it OTC, right? Can you imagine? One buyer comes in and say, "I'll buy all 24,000 worth of Bitcoins ordered that are out there, because these prices, range from currently 11,600 and change all the way up to what do we have, all the way up to $13,000. If you have some guy that come in trying to buy them all up, it's just going to push the price up dramatically. So that's the reason why they do what they do.
All right, guys. So this brings us to the end of today's live stream. As always, we love and appreciate all of you. So make sure you guys are tuning in to this live stream every Monday, every Friday, 5:30. We're here to bring you some information. Hopefully this information we're bringing to you, you find value in it. You can apply it to your situation, to your business, and to your understanding of what's taking place and the environment that you're in, okay? All right, Mr. Wong, we're going to wrap it up, sir. And the last verse for the folks out there.
Hey, guys, stay safe, all right? Please. The last thing that we need is, getting sick in this period of, difficult time, okay? So stay safe, do what you can, right? To stay safe and keep yourself protected and your family protected.
Absolutely. I second that, Mr. Wong. And you guys have yourself a fabulous weekend. Take care of yourselves. Take care of your families. A great weekend. And don't forget, see you guys here, same time, same place on Monday, 5:30 for the next live stream. And then Monday night for a compensation webinar. That being said, guy, my name is Gershom. That's Mr. Wong. James in the background producing everything. We'll see you guys Monday. Have a great weekend.
Have a great weekend, everyone.